We're live now.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone to our Economic Development Committee meeting, the Economic Development Committee. Commissioner Clerk, can you give us a roll call for membership?
Absolutely. Commissioner Cawthorn,
Present.
Commissioner Gage Watts, Commissioner Atkins,
Here.
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Burrell,
Here.
and Commissioner Johnson. I have that you have 4 of 6 committee members present, and that is a quorum.
All righty. Thank you very much. I will ask that Commissioner Burrell would do our invocation, and Commissioner Atkins would do our pledge of allegiance.
Bow your heads, please. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to be here today. Thank you for bringing us together to do the business of the people of Caddo Parish. Bless us, oh Lord, through all this the trial and tribulations that we're going through with COVID and other things, and bless those whose families who have having to suffer from the deaths of COVID. We want to thank you again for just being able to call you Lord. All these blessings in Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Please join me in standing and facing the flag and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to
Allegiance to the flag
the United
of the United
States
States of America,
and to the republic,
to the republic which stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty and
justice
justice
for all.
for all. Okay, Commissioner Clerk.
Okay, at this point, I do not have any agenda additions unless you have any today.
No, I do not.
Okay, then it would be appropriate at this time if you would like to have a motion, if you'd like to consider a motion to approve consideration of the items on the agenda under Louisiana Revised Statutes 4217.1.
All right, so moved. Okay,
Second.
second. Okay, it's been properly moved and second. I'll move it by acclamation. And then you want to announce the certificate of teleconference?
Yes, certificate of teleconference is attached at this point. There's no action required on that document. And that brings us to public comments for the teleconference, where citizens who want to address the committee are asked to fill out a comment card online and before the meeting. And those are submitted to our office. We will read those on during the meeting. People are also invited to call the phone number at our office at this point in the meeting. That number is 318-226-6596. Again, that is 318-226-6596. Should somebody want to give a public comment live. And then I did receive a comment online.
Okay.
Commissioner Cawthorn, I believe you received this comment as well. I just want to make sure that they intended for this to be read in the public meeting. I think that they did, but did you happen to see this comment?
No, I did not.
Okay. Well, I'll read it, and if I come across anything that sounds like perhaps it wasn't meant to be shared publicly, I'll stop. But it says this comment comes from Rachel Mayo, who says, "Dear Caddo Economic Development Chairman and Committee, I'm writing on behalf of a private development team currently at a crucial deliberation point for deciding if they will invest in and around the area of North Shreveport Corridor. Due to legal disclosures and the competitive nature of economic development, I cannot share as much as we would like. However, I can share that the development would create approximately 750 new jobs for this area across multiple sectors and pay above minimum wage and benefits that are commensurate with employment. We believe that the creation of an economic development district is very proactive at this time If set up at the right time with the right structure, the district can encourage additional investments, support existing businesses, and create jobs without raising taxes on businesses or residents in the district. I can now also share that the development team has conducted market analysis in North Shreveport and North Bossier to determine the best fit for additional development. It seems reasonable to locate as close to the new development site as possible, but market trends also show that much of the Shreveport traffic frequency does business in North Bossier Parish as well. The team has a very short window of time to make decisions. Having resources that don't create any additional tax burden to help improve the appearance, infrastructure, and curb appeal of the immediate area looks favorable for the consideration. And that concludes the public comment that we received. Linda, do you have anybody on the line?
No callers.
I have not received any callers either. Do you want to give another minute, or you want to move on to the next item on the agenda?
No, we can go ahead and move on. We announced it and usually give it a minute and see if anybody chimes in. So
Okay.
we can go ahead to next item.
Okay, under new business, the first item is to discuss the proposed Amazon TIF district. It includes remarks from Drew Mouton with the City of Shreveport and Justin Dixon of NLEP, both of whom I believe are on the line with us today.
Yes, they are. What I'd like to do at this time, welcome everybody here once again. And if Commissioner Jackson is available, if he's on the line, I would like for him to start off, kind of lay out his proposed TIF, the benefits, and whatever it is he wants to say. And then after that, we can let Drew Mouton chime in and Justin Dixon. I did see you, Commissioner Jackson.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What you need me to do something?
Yeah, I said you can kind of chime in if you'd like to give us an overview of the TIF, its benefits, and how it benefits Caddo Parish. And I also want to recognize that we've got Council Lady Capital Taylor on, and if she wants to comment, feel free to do such after we finish with Mr. Mouton, Mr. Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your patience and diligence. The TIF district, as laid out in the ordinance, basically covers a section of the North Market area. And I like to start off always by saying the proposed TIF district does not raise any taxes. I also tell folks there's not anything that the Caddo Commission, the City of Shreveport, or the Caddo Parish School Board will do to increase anybody's valuations. The proposed TIF basically takes the increments, which is the improved values or the increase in sales tax revenue or the increase in school board tax revenues. And they basically just dedicate it toward improvements within the district. Councilwoman Taylor, myself, and School Board Member Terrence Benson, we've had conversations among ourselves about this concept and this idea. I have looked at East Baton Rouge and what they have done with regard to their TIF district. I will say that this is not uncommon. If you look across the country where Amazon locations pop up, these TIF districts pop up. I have heard concerns about, is this the same as what took place at Mall St. Vincent, or is this the same as what took place downtown with the downtown development area? I want to ensure folks that these two, or this particular district, has nothing to do with those two. Those two districts were set up in a fashion in which they were set up after the fact. If you set it up at the right time with the right purpose and mission, with the right structure, as the respondent or the commentator just made, and Jeff, I got that email as well, you will know that now is the time to set up your TIF district and not wait until after the fact. There are jobs on the line, listening to that person who wrote in, and it's the right thing to do at the right time to do. No one is chasing any pipe dreams. We understand that in some cases a TIF district didn't work out the way it should work. but no one will lose anything from this TIF district. No one will receive any extra burdens from this TIF district. And so I know there may be a lot of anxiety, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's been either misplaced or placed out there into some folks' mind, but there's nothing that's going to put anybody at a competitive disadvantage in this particular district. And so some folks indicated that they have some questions or concerns. I'm here today to answer those questions or concerns that they may have. But the TIF district follows the statute that's laid out in Louisiana law. It also follows in the same and consistent with what has been put in place with regard to the TIF district in North Caddo with Walmart and those that are being looked at in the undeveloped areas of Caddo Parish up in Todd's district. And so this is something that we see. We know that there's a lot of retail leakage over to North Bossier. I went to lunch today and Mr. Mouton and Councilwoman Taylor, and if the mayor is listening or Chief Whitehorn, unfortunately, y'all didn't get any sales tax from me from lunch today. Bossier got it because I hopped the river instead of making a 20-mile trek down to Uri Drive to go to Smoothie King. And what you'll find is I do that often, unfortunately, because I don't eat fried food. And that's not my preference. And that's not a lot of folks' preference. So I think it's just smart development for us to take resources that are going to be generated right here in Shreveport and Caddo and reinvest it back into the businesses in the corridor that's right here in Shreveport and Caddo Parish. I'll end by saying that I had a very good call with Jessica Bro. Was that her name, Erica? Jessica Bro on Friday. Myself, Assistant Administrator Erica Bryant, Justin Dixon, and Angie White of NLEP. And the comments that Mrs. Bro made is they have no issues with this. In fact, they were very happy that I reached out to them because in certain areas, no one had ever reached out to them. They just did it. And they stand ready to support and comply in any way that they can. And so she closed with the comments saying, this is your area. You all know what's best. And she specifically said, you know what's best for your district. And if I'm misquoting that, Erica, please correct me. But she said, you know what's best for your district because you're elected to represent them and we'll look to you. And so that's basically, you know, that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to mislead people. I don't want people to read anything more or less into the concept because it's not a foreign concept. It's a tool that the state statute allows for us to do to encourage investments and developments within certain areas. And so, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'll end my comments. And, you know, I think the meeting was intended for Mr. Dixon and Mr. Mouton to provide commentary, and I'll yield my time to them, and I'm here to respond. Mr. Jerry Jones, who I had anticipated having on the call, he had a conflict and couldn't join, but you know, I'm here. I think I can handle any questions, and as far as the legal stuff, we have our legal team that's here that can answer any legalities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Let me, Mr. Dixon is traveling today. So what I want to do is change the orders of the presentation. Don't know how much time he really has, but I'd like for him to make his comments, and then we'll move to Drew Mouton. And after Drew, if Councilwoman Taylor wants to make any comment, she can do it at that time, and then we'll entertain questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawthorn. I appreciate it. I appreciate the committee letting NLEP speak with you guys today. I hope to be speaking with this same committee in the very near future over some other business. So, you know, I was asked, you know, my comments on this, having been in economic development, been around these, and I would imagine they're going to match up with others. I've talked with Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Atkins on this, and my comments to both were the same. I think if you're going to do something like this, I think they can be very powerful. if structured the correct way. But I think you've got to touch 4 points and make sure through this process you hit these 4 points. And this is really the extent of my comments. Number one, do no harm to your existing tenants. You can't penalize anybody that's there and decisions they made in the past that they can't adjust now. Number two, do nothing to negatively affect the recruitment of additional investment into the area. Number three, you have to have a well-defined plan. This is where it gets choppy that I've seen in the past, is if it's not very specific that we're going to use the proceeds for this exact point, and you leave it up to interpretation, that's where the challenges come. I've seen it done where they have done it on the retail level. I was not involved. That's not my alley. But they said, we're going to create a TIF district and the proceeds are going to go towards community development. Well, I promise you, there's 97 million things in my mind right now that I could attach to community development. So you just have to be very specific with which route you're going to be using the proceeds for. And then the fourth thing, you always have to protect the community. Looking down the road, what does this mean when this TIF rolls off? What are the impacts, or maybe the unforeseen impacts that we need to think about? And so those are the 4 points. Do no harm to existing tenants, do nothing to negatively affect recruitment, have a well-defined plan, and protect the community. Having said that, that's my stance on it. It's pretty much down the middle of the line. I love both sides of the aisle, and I need both sides of the aisle to accomplish my goals. But I appreciate what you guys are doing. And having said that, I'll stop and yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for your comments and insight.
Thank you, sir.
Now we will allow Drew Mouton to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, I'll say first, Justin and I have talked about this off and on, even preceding this particular area that we're talking about here. Personally, I love economic development districts. I love the idea of a TIF district, and I appreciate Commissioner Jackson for proposing it here. I don't want to say that on behalf of the city that we have any concerns, but I think we do have some questions. And part of that is to, I think, Justin's third point, this idea of a very well-defined plan for use of proceeds. This is sort of one question mark that I didn't see addressed, I guess, in detail in the proposal that we saw. The other part is more a reflection of what we have up here. And, I have the benefit of never having to be elected to anything. And so I can say something that doesn't sound very cheerleadery, but I'm going to speak to the truth here. We don't have in our region a very well-defined strategic planning function. And I say that in contrast to Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, et cetera, where there are generally publicly funded, highly engaged, well-staffed, well-resourced planning units. And so, for instance, you mentioned the East Baton Rouge Amazon-related TIF district down there. Bill Baton Rouge has a very detailed development plan for that region, that Cortana Mall region. And it addresses not just the TIF district, but additional infrastructure and investment that will go into the area. And so I think my concern, and again, I want us to use TIF districts, but I want us to use them as part of a broader plan to ensure that we can produce the result that we want to produce in this area. Part of my concern too is that, I know I'm speaking the obvious here, but when we're collecting an increment, because we've been successful in a district and those dollars are directed solely within the increment, that also means that to a degree, we're depriving the immediate neighbor of the benefits sometimes of that investment. So we're taking the money, we're keeping it home. I like the idea, but the consequence sometimes is that we may have other adjoining businesses or residences and homeowners and so on that won't directly receive the benefit of this economic upside. And so we are indirectly, or at least potentially, taking something away from folks that really could benefit from it. And in a 136 square mile footprint in the city that has been under-resourced for a really long time, for me, that's a very important point. I want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that can allow us to support and develop infrastructure across the city. And the last point is that as an incentive, as the rest of the country has sort of demonstrated to us, every time Amazon's gone into an area, they brought businesses with them. And so this TIF district here does not appear to be strictly necessary to bring other businesses to that area. And again, that's not to say that we don't do it, but that's to say that we're going to bring businesses in because people want to locate by Amazon. And let's make sure that we're building this program out in a way that ensures success longer term. And I'll end by pointing out the two examples that Commissioner Jackson brought up, Mall St. Vincent and Red River District. And in a way, these are good examples of both success and failure. The Mall St. Vincent TIF district is sort of the easy version of an EDD. You've got a mall owner, you've got a mall manager, you've got businesses, you've got a municipality that all have the same incentive to increase the tax base. And although that mall in particular has not been wildly successful over the years, it has produced a stream of tax increment over time. Red River District is exactly the example that we need to follow in terms of what not to do. It was defined, its boundaries were defined in a way that didn't bring in that additional aligned incentive to ensure that it could sustain itself or continue to grow, or that there was an incentivized owner or participant there that could weather tough times and adapt to the changing economy and so forth. And as a result, as I think most folks know here, we derive almost no increment benefit from the Red River District now, and we're having to reimagine how that whole part of town works. So there are examples here where we can do a good job and where we can do a less than good job. And I would like to see us do this. I do believe, Commissioner Jackson, this is a good area, but I think the best practices around the country are demonstrate that we bring all of the parties that are related here and develop a more comprehensive investment development plan for that area, not just the proceeds, but what else we can bring to it to ensure that we maximize the opportunity here. And that's my comments.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Taylor, do you want to chime in?
Good afternoon, Commissioner Carthon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm actually going to yield my comments right now. I actually like to take a listen to what everyone else is saying. And if
Okay.
you don't mind, I'll come at the end.
That's fine. Thanks. All right, so we've got some commissioners with their hand up. We've got first Commissioner John Atkins, then Commissioner Stephen Jackson, and Commissioner Robert Webb.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cawthorn. Some people feel that I'm against this project. I'm not necessarily against it. I just want to learn more about it and make sure we understand it and make sure we go about it the right way. So with that statement being made, what is, I guess this legislation that's on the commission agenda would actually allow the TIF district to be established, but I guess I'll direct this to Commissioner Jackson. So will we then have a committee? Is a board formed for the TIF that then develops all of the structure around it and all the rules and the development plan associated with it? That's a question to Commissioner Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a question to me.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
As stated, to be just short, yes, because what folks are asking for is they're asking to put the cart before the horse or the buggy before the horse. And you're asking for a strategic plan, but I want to go back to North Baton Rouge. North Baton Rouge is an economic development district that was created by an act of the legislature, and they got a dedicated hotel motel tax. So they were created. The reason why they were able to do a plan for the Amazon TIF district is because the North Baton Rouge, which is sort of a umbrella organization, was created. So the only way they got their plan for their Amazon TIF district was they created the district. So they've had the benefit of having a parent organization. We do not have the benefit of having a parent organization. I'd love to do that, but the reality is we don't have time for that. And if we drag, it won't even be beneficial to create anything. And I'm going to disagree with the fact or with the notion that if we do nothing, the development will come. We just had, our clerk just read a note from someone saying that 750 jobs are on the line here. And they believe a TIF district is doable. We've got to do infrastructure improvements because the state had to step up and do the $1.5 million street for Amazon. We didn't have those resources locally to do it. So we have to put some skin in the game. And I'm going to disagree, but I'll come back to that about another point that was made about depriving another area. So to answer your question is there has to be a district created. There has to be a board that is established. Just like with everything, there are steps to it, but you got to create the district first. And if we wait, we might as well do nothing. So yes, the goal is to create the district first. Because you can't create a plan for something that doesn't exist.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Another follow-up question. You stated I'm not trying to quiz you on these matters. I'm just trying to get clarity on the situation. You stated in the opening statements that there'd be no new taxes on anybody or no new fees paid or something to that nature. I mean, how do you envision this TIF district being funded if there are no new taxes or no new fees?
Well, that's a good question. When you have a tax increment finance district, if you set it up right now, and if you read the articles from East Baton Rouge, the reason why they felt time was of the essence is because the baseline is low right now. And so I'll give you the example that I gave Councilwoman Taylor and others is there's an empty
Shell.
There's an empty gas station sitting right out front of that area right now. It's collecting zero. It's bringing in zero. And so once somebody locates in there, that increment now will start going to help fund the district. And so that's what funds the district. But if you wait until everything is complete, which is what happened with St. Vincent Mall, which is what happened with downtown, none of those tax increment finance districts were created prior to St. Vincent Mall being set up and prior to the downtown area being created. They all were created after the fact. And so the only way they could realize an increment, which is obvious, was to levy a new tax or raise a tax. And so if you do it now, pre-development, and again, Jessica Bro agreed 100%. If you do it now, you don't have to come in and say, okay, well, we've got to realize an increment to make this TIF district realize an increment. So now we got to raise taxes. That's unnecessary to do.
And Ms. Bro, you made reference to Ms. Bro. Was she with LED?
No, Jessica Bro is directly, she's the economic development manager for Amazon.
Oh, okay.
And Ms. Bryant was on that call and Mr. Dixon was on that call as well.
Okay, so in your mind, Amazon's okay with this?
They have no problem with it at all. Their thing was they stand ready to support the compliance aspect of it, which is tell them where should they pay their tax receipts to. So they had no issues with this at all. In fact, her thing was, you know what's best for the district, and they don't get involved, and they were happy because East Baton Rouge didn't involve them in the conversation whatsoever. Okay,
well, that makes a big difference. I was concerned. One of the concerns I had is that we kind of had taxation without representation because if there were residents in the district, they'd be able to vote, as you know, but there's no residents, so they're only businesses. And I was concerned that we were going to be putting an incremental tax as it's not an incremental tax. Let me clarify my statement. As the property values increase, which they actually allow to happen, then there will be taxes on that incremental amount, correct?
But they would pay that. If I'm correct, Ms. Bryant, they're gonna pay that regardless of whether we do nothing today or not, right? That's just gonna happen. And so the only way to avoid it is not build the building over there.
Right, that's correct. They would pay additional taxes on increases in assessments.
I'm with you. So
assuming it rolls forward, is that my understanding?
What was the question? As long as we what?
That's under the assumption that there's any increase or there's a roll forward?
Right, so in 4 years, if the overall assessment actually increases, which, as you know, it may or may not, considering our current economic climate, then yes, it will be put in the commission's hands as to whether or not to roll forward.
Okay.
Nothing's on that.
And so, Commissioner Jackson, continuing in my education here, so if the legislation were established, then a board of some nature would be, a board or some governing body would be put in place around the legislation to develop the rules of operation and the development plan. And then they would ultimately control the use of the dollars that go into the fund over time.
That is one way to do it, or it could be directly the city or the parish, or a joint agreement between the city or the parish. So it's not necessarily it's not like how we do with the IDB, but that is one way to do it.
Okay.
But there are multiple ways to structure the deal.
Okay. All right. That's all I have right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. Commissioner Jackson, you were next on the board.
I'll yield to Commissioner Burrell and Johnson.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Burrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably more on an educational basis. I'm very supportive of TIF districts if they are done correctly. I'm supportive of any economic development district because that is some of the things that I worked on, I guess, in the last 20 years, being in politics on the city level and the state level, and now the parish. But I had a couple of questions. I think John Atkins may have answered one, and the first one, there are no voters in this district. I noticed the layout of the district in the map looked like it, based upon my knowledge of this area, that it looked like it follows most of the business corridor in there. It does branch out near some residential areas, but there are no voters in this area. That's the question.
That's my understanding, is there are no voters in the area.
Okay, because if it does, you have to put it before them, even if there's one.
Right, and let me say something. Can I speak to that real quick?
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
I don't mind at some point maybe drawing this to where, because my thought is, and you can ask whatever Stephen's last name is that draws the maps. I don't mind putting Cherokee Park, which is probably going to be the most affected neighborhood. I don't mind drawing Cherokee Park, School Park, and I'm just talking about the areas that I represent and that little area right around CCC into it. But to get to an election creates more time to set it up. And so
Right.
I if this was sent to voters, they would definitely affirm it, because what they are tired of doing is they're tired of jumping over to the river to Bossier, and they're tired of the only option that they have, particularly around the retail area, is going down to Uri Drive. And I'm not talking about cannibalizing anything, but what I'm talking about is stopping the retail leakage that's taking place in the northern part of Caddo. That was the whole point of putting the Walmart up in North Caddo, was stopping this leakage that takes place going over to Bossier. Councilwoman Taylor and I, we've done a great job at fighting back liquor stores. And we believe that the North Shreveport area is right for some other more conducive development. So I think if this was put to voters, they wouldn't have a problem at all supporting it.
Okay, well, that was my point.
No, right, I know.
Yeah, my point was that I support,
Yes, sir.
Including some residential areas if the area need redeveloping.
Yes, sir.
It serves as a good tool to work along with economic development to do community development at the same time.
Absolutely.
That's been my experience in dealing with TIFs and how it can help jumpstart redevelopment areas. The second thing that I wanted to ask is if there are existing business, if this district only can involve existing businesses, how will we set the tax base level in order to get the increment financing that we need in order to create our fund?
Yes, sir. And staff can jump in if I'm wrong, but we have to spend a period of time establishing a baseline. And so that once that baseline is set, that's why timing is important, because if we spend 6 months setting it up, the goal is for the place to be open by spring 2022. And so we keep kicking the can. We're prolonging the baseline. And that's what East Baton Rouge realized is the longer you prolong, the longer it takes, because by law, we have to establish a baseline. And so the notion that we're going to deprive an area is not true. The taxes that the city have, if the city got $100 today, they're going to get $100 tomorrow. And everything over that $100 after that baseline is established will go back into the district. And so nobody's losing anything, Commissioner Burrell, as it was stated earlier, no one is being deprived of anything. That baseline is going to be set.
That was my whole point, because you have 3 different taxes that you can use. Right. And sometimes that creates a timeline that is not always conducive to what you're trying to do. I'm saying that to help you, not to hurt you. Right. Just you're to right. Say that these are some of the things that I know that goes into it. Right. The next question, let's see. I guess my last question was, which taxes would be levied in order to create the added investment dollars for your funds. But because you got occupancy tax that you can use, you have property taxes as well as sales taxes. Are we looking at one or all 3 to create a baseline?
Right. Well, of course, we can't take those that are dedicated already. So you have certain sales taxes, certain taxes that are dedicated, like to the poor and to the sheriff and things like that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about right now, we're talking about the increment from the parish property taxes. And then Councilwoman Taylor has stated an interest, or at least support, or initial support for the city sales tax, and school board member Vincent, he's stated support for doing the same with the school board for schools only, because the school board taxes can't be rededicated for any other use other than schools. And so you've got I think this way he stated is there's no reason why a person who works at Amazon can't drop their child off at school on their way to work and pick them up on their way home. And so we're looking at a combination of those things to help support the district. And that's what's going to ultimately make it work.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, I think that's about the last one. I did call community development because, as I stated in our meeting, I remember when I was on city council, we set up some redevelopment districts, and I thought economic development district, which was called the Central Economic Development District when Bo Williams was there. And I have a map that showed it going up into this area, but I don't know how far. So if that be the case, I don't know if we're overlaying one district onto another district. Not that it's anything wrong with it from what I can understand, but I just wanted to make sure that, we weren't creating something that we already have a vehicle. We just need to maybe refine it or something. That's the only other thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrell. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Commissioner Burrell led up to one of the questions I was going to ask about which tax we was looking at using, because I know initially when I talked to Commissioner Jackson, it was strictly the property tax, and I support the property tax assessment on the TIF. Now, if we're going to go into the sales tax piece of it, then I'm going to have to stand on the firm ground of no, because a lot of people in District 2 shop in that same corridor, and that would be additional taxes on them because of the Brookshires, the county market, things that they do every day. Now, you did say that you was talking about sales tax as well.
I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but I hope you're going to let me respond to that.
Well, I mean, you can respond after I finish, but based on what I just heard from what Commissioner Burrell asked you,
Clarify what you heard.
is not, you saying property taxes, and then you also mentioned sales taxes from the school board and maybe the city.
Mr. Chairman,
Maybe.
let me clarify that. That wasn't a question. That wasn't a
So
question.
I'm
That wasn't a statement I made.
just stating my vote. It will be a no if sales tax are involved, because the people that I represent do not want a new tax levied upon them from, like I said, if there is a sales tax levied on the TIF.
And like
I will
I
not be
said, there
supportive.
is not a
I
new
have the
tax.
floor. I
Commissioner
have the
Jackson,
floor.
I got it, Commissioner
But I'm
Jackson.
not gonna sit here and let
Commissioner
somebody
Johnson finish.
misrepresent
Hold
what's
on,
being
hold on.
said.
Let him finish. Go ahead, Commissioner
I
Johnson.
simply said that if it's a property tax, it's fine. If it is a sales tax levied on this TIF, I will be against it. That's all I'm saying. I'm through, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
And Commissioner Johnson, you direct that to Commissioner Jackson for an answer?
It was not
Yeah.
it was not a question. It was a statement. I'm basically saying that if there is a sales tax levied
Okay.
from the TIF, that I would not support it. If it's just
Okay.
only on property taxes, I'm good with it.
Go ahead and respond, Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm saying very loud and clear, there is no new taxes being levied. I'm making that very clear, and I want to be plain on that. The existing tax rate that is there is the only tax rate that will be there. And so I don't know who's coming up with this notion that there's going to be a new tax. This is going to be the existing tax rate. Whatever that is, if the city is levying 4% or 3%, it's going to stay 4% or 3%. The increment, the increased activity after a baseline is established. So if the city is getting $100 in taxes right now, when that baseline is established, that baseline comes back that they're getting $100, $100.01 will go, that 1 penny now will go to the district. It's not a new tax. So stop. I want people to don't walk away from here. And I'm going to be passionate about that, because people will hear something and they'll take it and they'll misrepresent it. This is not a new tax. This will not be a new tax. I'm not going to support a new tax. What I'm saying is the increment, the increased activity, the increased value. That is it. That is all. Thank you.
And let me chime in right now, if I may. It's
No, Mr. Chairman, I think you overlooked my comment, in which I was the one who actually started this thing.
Hold on for just a sec. All right, so you didn't have your hand raised. That's why I didn't address you. So go ahead right now.
Well, I don't know if everybody had their hand raised or not.
I'm saying you.
The only reason
I can see everybody's hand from the screen. You didn't have your hand raised. So, but go ahead.
No, I wanted to. Maybe if I would have made a statement to clarify what I said, maybe we would have even gotten into this conversation. I only said that there were 3 taxes that you could use in the TIF district, and then I said which of the three or will all 3 be used. I don't know. I don't remember sales tax ever being mentioned that we were going to increase any of that. I only made the statement for clarification that we could use 3 different taxes, because that's what the statute says. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to.
There was no comment about raising any sales taxes. I don't remember that ever being said. I was the only one that brought up anything about sales taxes before that.
Okay. I see Commissioner Johnson hand again.
Yes. So after this meeting and y'all get a chance, listen to the verbiage of the comments that were said. Second of all, who is going to be running the TIF?
Commissioner Jackson. That's addressed to Commissioner Jackson.
As
Yes,
stated,
or legal, whichever one.
or stated. I mean, it's my legislation, so as stated, when Commissioner Atkins asked me, he said there are any number of ways that this could be set up. There's a board that can be established, an independent board. It could be a joint agreement between the city, the parish, and the school board. It could be a joint agreement between the city and the parish. That's what we have to get to, and not predetermine the outcome and try to pigeonhole it. So I'm not here to say that somebody or some group or some organization is going to run the TIF district. My position has been let's set it up.
I got that part. All right, my next question is, what does the parish get if we utilize sales tax?
The parish gets nothing because we don't levy a sales tax in the city of Shreveport. We know that.
I know. So my point is, well, who will be running? And that goes back to who's going to be running the TIF, because if we're not in control of the TIF can get out of control.
No, it could be a joint agreement between the city. That's how I would envision, is that everybody who is involved would be at the table. Those conversations are being had.
But if it's the city that's going to take the lead on that.
No, it's not the city taking the lead, Lyndon. You're misrepresenting it.
I'm asking questions. This is not misrepresenting.
Well, everybody has said that this is a joint effort. And so you can do it under a joint management agreement where you have a representative from the city council, a representative from the parish commission, a representative from the school board. If you're going to use all three, but it's got to be set up first. And we're trying to determine things that we're trying to get 5 steps ahead of ourselves.
I think it goes parallel personally. That's just me.
Well, I mean, we can also try to decide what projects are going to be funded as well. That could be done parallel as well too.
That's an outcome of based on what
gentlemen, hold on.
Based on the income that you get will determine what projects you can actually run. If you're trying to set it up, you also need to set up who is going to be one that's going to be managed. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Let me say this.
Hold on. Everybody hold up for just a second. Is Commissioner, I'm sorry, is Attorney Frazier available? She's on the call.
Here.
Hey, Attorney Frazier, there's been several concerns as it relates to the formation and creation of this TIF district. Quote unquote, what are going to be the guardrails that protect us against some of the concerns that have been mentioned? And are you all's office are going to actually work with Commissioner Jackson in forming this TIF? How's that process going to be made to come to realization?
Yes, Commissioner, we will, as far as forming the TIF, the legislation you have in front of you will create the TIF district. Now,
Okay.
as far as forming a board to run the TIF district, you all have the options of, as was stated, entering into agreements with other government subdivisions and appointing folks. You have the option to participate directly and be the board yourself. So you all will decide who that board is. You will have to promulgate further legislation to decide who sits on that board.
Similar to what Commissioner Hopkins recently did with his board, the advisory board, he set up a process, something similar to that.
The advisory board, I'm not familiar with.
But I'm just
Are
saying,
you talking about the zoning?
Yes, and what I'm alluding to, he did formulate a board, and members of the commission were asked to add appointees. My question is that process, what he did is going to be similar with the TIF?
No, that is not that process, because see, those advisory boards have to come back and make recommendations to you.
Okay.
Whatever board you put in place will actually be the ones levying the taxes and putting in place for where the funds are going to go.
So it'd be more akin to similar what the IDB board does?
Yes.
More similar, yes.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Jackson, hand is up.
Well,
I hadn't relinquished the floor yet.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so basically what Donna said is, in my opinion, is that you can actually create who's going to be running the board at the same time you do the district. If you don't have the district, you got to know who's going to run it, who's going to manage it, and then if you don't have the district, it doesn't make any sense. But if you are going to do it, you still need to know who's going to be the one that's going to be running the TIF. And that's what I'm saying. We don't have to wait until down the road and then say this is how it's going to be ran by what organization. You already got the votes by that time. I say you can do it parallel, and then that way you know how it's going to be operating if it's passed. I mean, we've done that before on many different situations that we know how it's going to be set up, but we don't have to do it. You do A, and then you come back and do B, and then you come back and do C. You can do A and B together. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm done.
Yes, Commissioner Jackson, then Attorney Fraser.
I just want to respond to that. It's easy to come back after somebody's put something on the table and say what could have been done. I drafted this legislation with the purest intent in mind. And for somebody to come in and say, well, I want to see, or I think, or it's my opinion that you ought to do the board at the same time, I would prefer to go step A, step B, step C. Because as we can see, because I don't know that Todd's district was this convoluted. I'd be interested to see what the comments and what the commentary, and if we asked about if anybody asked Todd if he was going to have, when his board was going to be set up, or who that board was going to be, because I don't even think that even came up.
There's no other entities involved.
But again, the school board is out there. It's parish-wide levies of tax. The sheriff is out there. The port is out there, will be out there on a property. So my thing is, my preference is to see the TIF established, and then we create the board. And my hope is that this would be a joint endeavor. But what I don't want to do is try to drag this all the way out, trying to get everything done at point A, when we know, and Attorney Fraser just affirmed, there are many ways that this could be set up, because what I heard her say was you have options, and you can either go into a joint management agreement with those municipalities, or you can contract that out. There are multiple ways in which that can be done. And what I don't want to do is jump to step B or C when we're at step A, which is the creation of the district. If nothing is created, all we do is deal with the parish property tax part of it. That's why the statute requires the city give consent or give a resolution of support. So I think for my legislation, I would prefer us take a step-by-step incremental approach. And I would appreciate if folks wouldn't assume that because I want to take it step-by-step, that, oh, well, you got the TIF district set up and we just gonna go on down the road. That's not how I have operated in the past. And that's not how I would come to this committee or this body to operate today.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Attorney Fraser.
Commissioners, I do want to point out, I was not looking at the ordinance that was drafted initially, but it does say in the ordinance that is currently up for consideration that the governing body for the TIF district would be the parish commission. So that's what it says now. I don't know if there will be any changes to that, but that's what the ordinance currently says.
But Attorney Fraser, we, as that governing body, to my point is, we can go and we can do a joint management agreement with anybody. Is that correct?
Commissioner, I do think you can do that, but I'm thinking you're gonna have to change the ordinance to do that, or at least leave that part out of the ordinance so that you have some flexibility for that in the first place, because the problem will become who is going to actually vote on new taxes to be levied.
Don't say new taxes to be levied.
I mean, well, that's what I'm sorry, but I'm.
Proceeds above the baseline.
But there can be new taxes levied in the future if there's a vote to do that. There can be that. That can happen. Right now, the taxes will not be no new additional taxes, but you can levy new taxes on top of the TIF. Let's get that point out there and not sugarcoat it.
Nobody's tried to sugarcoat anything.
Okay, Attorney Fraser, you finished?
I'm done. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson, you chiming in, or Commissioner Johnson?
No, I deferred some of my comments.
All right. So it looks like at this juncture right here that so the next thing we got to do is pass. Okay, you got your hand up?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the commentary today. And I hope that the conversation has been had in earnest, because I talked to Commissioner Johnson at your request, Mr. Chairman, a couple of weeks ago. And the items that were discussed here today, the only concern that was provided was simply was about what would happen with the valuations if they decide to put that inside the product. And we talked through that. I didn't draft this legislation. And so if there's something in there that shouldn't be in there, Commissioner Jackson can't get that charge, because if you recall, we leave that all up to the legal staff. And so for somebody to even insinuate that that's my doing, I took I asked staff to draft the legislation, they drafted it. And what I'm saying is we can enter into an agreement with anybody to run this district. What is before us is creating the district. What's levied, how it's levied, when it's levied, that is something for that group that's going to be managing this, the strategic plan. That's for that group to sit down and start discussing. But for us to sit here and say, well, you know, I don't want to just create it just because. No, there are safeguards inside that legislation that gives us the ability to set it up right. And so the district is a great idea. It is what we need in North Shreveport. I think it's interesting for folks to say my constituents that I represent going to be negatively impacted, as is the folks that I represent wouldn't be as well. Because the folks who live in MLK are the same people who live in, same demographic of people who live in Cherokee Park, School Park, Allendale, and the surrounding area. So it's all the same people. The same people who live in Cherokee Park go to the Walmart up in North Caddo. I'm not complaining about the TIF district up there. Okay. They don't complain about the TIF district up there. We support
2 more people on the board, and be mindful.
And so I want to make sure that we keep the conversation where it is. The conversation before us is creating the district, so that the primary part of creating the district is, 1, to establish its boundaries, and 2, begin the process of establishing the baseline. We've got at least 4 years before we even do property tax reassessments. We've got to go to the council and get a resolution of support. But what I heard the clerk say, and I hope whoever submitted that comment, whatever firm they're watching, I hope they're not watching this. Because those 750 jobs, I got to believe, will not come to Caddo Parish. This is embarrassing. And we sit back and we wonder, Mr. Chairman, why is it that it's so difficult to do business and attract business here? Because people sit back and they see us fight over the simplest things. Thank you.
Thank you, man. But let me chime in and say this. What we have before us is your legislation that we're going to have to vote on. And I think, just as a caution to you, Commissioner Jackson, I think what you've got to do, you've got to convince in the minds of the other 11 commissioners that this is a good deal and the concerns that they have are being answered. I know we're going back and forth with methodology, this sort of thing, but I think we've got to come to the point where the concerns that whatever commissioners have that needs to vote for this, that you can work that out with them.
Mr. Chairman.
We got a couple of people ahead of you. We got City Councilwoman Taylor wants to speak, Commissioner Burrell and Commissioner Johnson. I'll come back to you. But be mindful, we got a 3:30 meeting. Go ahead, Councilor Taylor.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think the TIF district is very important to establish, but I think that we also have enough intelligence and that have laid the framework for us going in and doing this. So I think Mr. Dixon pointed out those particular relevant points of what we need to do in going in and establishing it. If we have the consent from the Economic Development Director or liaison for Amazon, then I think that we should move with the framework as it relates to this. We have, when Commissioner Burrell talked about the Central Economic Development District, I looked that up to Commissioner Burrell and see what information is in there for legislation that you have previously done as it relates to that. But I do think that this TIF district is very important without any new sales taxes, which I know is what I've always said to Commissioner Jackson as well, being imposed on any of our constituents.
Right.
But again, gentlemen, you all are intelligent enough, and I know this beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I can pick your brains from each one of you all, that we can go over here and develop this TIF district where it's going to be viable for North Shreveport and that community, because we understand that this district is on the rise. So I want to move forward in that framework as it relates to that. I'm going to speak to some of my other council colleagues, but Commissioner Burrell, I would like to have a conversation with you regarding that Central Economic Development District for sure, and see what that does cover and see in what ways that we can move ahead and support this.
Thank you,
Okay, that's
Councilwoman.
fine.
Go ahead, Commissioner Burrell.
Always there to assist. Didn't spend all those years there twiddling my thumb. You know, there are some things that has happened in the city that has been good. There are things that happened in the city that wasn't so good, like the Red River District. I was there fighting against that at one time, believe it or not, if you go back and look at the records. But my comments, Mr. Chairman, my final comments, I was listening to Councilman Jackson and Councilman Johnson. I try to be a mediator because I try to listen and see how they all fit. I think what we have here is a framework, that can be conducive to a district that could do a lot of good. I still caution and support the fact that if there are some residential properties that are around that need redevelopment, include some of that in there, even if there's a few votes. Commissioner Jackson said that he didn't feel uncomfortable that the people would not support it, even if there were voters there. But there are some areas in that. There are some communities up in that area that could use some boost. Some boost along with this economic development initiative that is taking place. Similar to what I was hoping to do with the I-49 issue coming through the city, that we would also create an economic development TIF to parallel that section to create a business corridor in there along there. That's the reason why this is so interesting to me. The second thing is, as I was listening, I don't see a big problem with modifying the language in the legislation where it would be more inclusive. I heard our attorney say that right now it's exclusively for the commission, but that can be changed if it's creating heartburn. And I don't think Commissioner Jackson his intent was to be able to hog this, because we're going to have the support of the city and other organizations. The third thing is to create that baseline. I think that's going to take more time probably than all the others. But those three things are the major things that I've heard here, and all of them are doable. So I don't think we need to be suspicious of one another in terms of we're trying to set this thing up so that we can get certain people to govern it. I did not hear that. Maybe I'm naive, but I did not hear that. And even if that's the case, I don't think any one commissioner can direct it anywhere, even if it's in his district. So hopefully that will create some sort of comfort level here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Let's see. Okay? I just want to say that, you should have dialogue between commissioners, whether it's informative, whether it's this is how I feel, without someone getting all bent out of shape. This is what we have committee meetings for. I would rather do it in the committee meeting than to do it on the floor of the body, because at that point in time, it does make us look bad because we couldn't hash it out in the committee. There's a big difference between this TIF and the TIFs that's being created on the I-49 corridor and the TIF that was built up on Highway 1. The parish run those. The parish is the governing body on those. We said what happens to those, not nobody else. So that's why I was making sure of who is going to be governing those TIFs. Because when you introduce the piece about sales, initially you got the baseline and then any increments above it. But that governing body, if it's not the right one, could come back and say, okay, we're in a deficit. We need to levy some taxes in that particular area. And now you can do that in the TIF because you don't have to go before the voters. Simply just being informative, making sure everybody knows what's going on about TIF, because there are a lot of people that probably on this call that don't fully understand the TIF. So I was just basically making sure that these are discussions that we should have, who's going to be running it and how. I said how I feel about the TIF. If there's going to be sales tax levied upon it, then I would be against it. And I'm quite sure other people on here will feel the same way. If it's property taxes, I'm good with it. That was my statement. That was not a question. That was just a statement that I made. So if me making statements make people bend out of shape, I'm sorry about that. But at the same time, this is how I do my debate. This is how I talk about things that have not been brought up, because you still have some people that's listening or watching us that still don't understand what a TIF is. What are they talking about? So I'm bringing all this out. So now that person who is not politically engaged will understand what a TIF is as much as possible.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, you still got the phone.
that's it. That's it.
Okay.
That's enough. Yeah.
I'm gonna let Commissioner Atkins go, and then I'm gonna let Commissioner Jackson finish up. Just mindful that we do have a 3:30 work session.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawthorn. I'll be brief. Thank you. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for setting up this meeting. It's been helpful to get all of us on the same discussion, the same call, the same discussion, and work through some of these issues in real time. So thank you for setting it up. I'd also like to ask as we move forward with this legislation, and if it's this phase or the next phase, that we consider having an economic development professional or two on the governing body, to ensure that we have some content expertise on the governing body as we move forward. So just something for us all to keep in mind. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Commissioner Atkins. I also want to chime in before Commissioner Jackson get on, just to offer another word of advice, that I think there's some issues that have been narrowed down today. And I think it would serve us well if Commissioner Jackson could get a one-on-one with maybe Commissioner Johnson, maybe Commissioner Atkins, just to make sure you guys are on the same page. So when we do bring the economic development professional to the table, we will be further down the road in understanding and kind of working out those differences that we may have. Commissioner Jackson, and then Attorney Frazier.
I'll yield to Attorney Frazier.
Attorney Frazier.
Commissioners, I was just going to say that I think I'm going to want to provide some further clarification on that governing of the TIF district. So I will send a memo to the committee within the next 2 days.
Thank you, Attorney Frazier.
Thanks.
And Commissioner Jackson.
Yes. Let me say to your later point, Mr. Chairman, You indicated that I should reach out to Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Atkins. When this legislation was first brought onto the agenda, and I could be wrong, but I don't think the record will prove me wrong. Commissioner Atkins said that the chairman of the ED committee had questions. And my direct response to him was, I talked to the chairman of the ED committee and he had no questions. And I proceeded to say, if he had questions, I will reach out to you again. And I did. In that conversation, you encouraged me to reach out to Commissioner Johnson. And I immediately did. I called him. I asked him if he had any concerns. I asked him if I could answer any questions. He told me what his concerns were. And right then and there, I answered those questions. Here today, these are questions or concerns that I had never heard of about the governance structure. And you all should know me by now to know that if there is something that I could do to work with anybody, I try to do that. And I think Commissioner Burrell alluded to that. I've always been willing to work with people who want to work on a solution, not hit you with these gotcha moments or surprises. I'm all for a conversation. At that meeting, I said I welcomed an Economic Development Committee conversation. I welcomed that. And then people started saying, well, it seemed like you don't want to have a conversation. I don't know where that stuff comes from, because I said I welcome the conversation. But what I do not welcome is people kind of withholding commentary or withholding questions or withholding suggestions. That's not how anything gets done. When I ask you, what are your comments? What are your concerns? Give them to me. And if these pop into your head a week later, reach out to me. A commissioner reached out to me 2 weeks after we had that meeting and said, I got a question about this. Can you educate me? Can you enlighten me on this? And I did. And so if these are some after the fact questions that you had, we've had more than enough time. I've talked to several folks on this call and none of these questions came up. So I can do my best to try to alleviate concerns and questions, but I can't address what I don't know or concerns and questions if the only time that they come up is if they come up at a meeting. We're gonna wait till we get here to have this conversation. Because the only concern that was presented to me by some was, is this a tax increase? And I emphatically told them no, and I stand by that today. My understanding, and this is directed to the parish attorney, Attorney Frazier, when I asked y'all to draft this, didn't I send y'all some model legislation to draft this behind?
Actually, you asked us to do it based on the one that we did for the North Caddo TIF district.
Walmart, right?
Right.
Right. And so you all basically just took what you had in there and you changed the legal description of the location. Is that basically it?
That's it.
So this is this legislation is cookie cutter, word for word, word for word. And basically all they do is take the statute and turn it into an ordinance. That's what it seems like. Is that correct, Attorney Frazier?
Somewhat. It's a little bit more detailed in that,
Okay.
but
So,
yeah.
So I don't want folks, and I don't want legal to think that I'm upset at them, but I want folks to understand that the parish commission adopted this ordinance in 2015, this exact ordinance in 2015. And I get that there are other municipalities involved, but the only new player in the game at this point is the city of Shreveport, because the school board, Mrs. Brown or Mrs. Barnett, the school board collects a tax out there by the Walmart too, right?
Yes.
So the school board, so the only new partner at the table at this point is the city of Shreveport. This is word for word, except the location. The same thing that was adopted in 2015. Nothing different. So I don't want folks leaving here thinking Commissioner Jackson is trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. No, I've asked them to take what we already approved and do it for this. The baseline and setting this thing up is the most important thing that we need to do now. And as you heard earlier, We've got folks who are looking at bringing jobs here that say that they have a crucial deadline that they need to get to. And I hope that we would support jobs in North Caddo as I have supported jobs all across this parish before, all across this parish. I hope we will be unwavering in supporting jobs the same way if we hadn't already lost. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Jackson. Hey, we 12 minutes away from our work session. Commissioner Johnson has his hand up. That'll be the last comment, and we'll have to move for an adjournment. Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that, you know, based on what I see, that there is a difference between the ones that were already created by the parish or being created by the parish and this one. And that's why I wanted to get the governing body of who's going to be the one that's going to run this TIF down pat, because if we set up this TIF, but say the school board or the city of Shreveport decides, well, we want to do something that we don't want to do, but we're in the minority of this, then we're out of control. I mean, that piece is going to pass if it's 2-1. And so with the one that's in the Highway 1 Walmart area, that TIF, because we control it, the school board is going to get whatever we set up. They can't come in and say, well, we want to raise this and we want to take a vote on it. They out of the picture. We control that. The school board and the city, well, if we're going to set it up with them being joint partners, have the opportunity now to say, okay, we want to get some sales tax revenue more than just the increment. And based upon if it's two of their votes to our one, then we're out. So I just wanted to set all that out there so everybody would know what we're dealing with when you're talking about joint ventures and things of that sort. Even with the funds that we raise with this, and you're talking about doing improvements, you still got to do an MOU with the city in order to do that if it's infrastructure. So just letting that all lay out, not just saying that this is just an easy one piece of paper with some words on it and it moves forward. There are some things that has to be moving along with it in order for it to work right. And not just saying we got a TIF in this area and that's it. We got other things that has to move and work simultaneously for it to work right. That's all I'm saying. And I think that's what the two other guys that came on earlier were saying. We just got to make it work right and not just have a TIF on a piece of paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Obviously, we got a little bit more work to do. I'm confident that we'll be able to work it out. And I just leave this quotation: seek you first to understand and then to be understood. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. See you guys in 10 minutes.